At the top of the hour virtually, and that's not meant to be a pun, it's actually the case. So we are at the top of the hour, 10 o'clock it is. That is in South Africa. In New Zealand, it's 8 p.m. in the evening. So our next speaker, Sally Anderson, coming to us 8 p.m. already on Thursday in New Zealand. So absolute privilege to have Sally. Sally is at the forefront of sustainable and human and organizational transformation. She partners with CEOs, C-suite executives, high-level influencers to achieve unprecedented and sustainable results. And I think building resilience that lasts is Sally's topic today. And I think that's a perfect follow-up to Michael's session, where he totally flattened us all in the first half of his presentation, then tried to build us back up in the second half with giving us some great information. And so Sally is now going to come in and tell us how we can take that forward and really build some resilience at last. So folks, please, even though Michael trashed social media, today is really about the social media. Get in, get online, get onto Facebook, share the session that's out there, get onto your WhatsApp groups, tell people to come and join us, like it, share it, let's get it out there. This is quality information that we're getting here today from quality speakers, and it's valuable stuff given the unprecedented times that we're living through now. But back to Sally. Sally, absolute privilege to have you back on this morning. Your evening, as I said earlier, wonderful to have you on board. We really appreciate your time, especially given the difference in the time zones. But having had an amazing experience with Sally just a short 2 months ago, I think it was 24th of July when she came on our Wisdom's Global Summit, blew us all away then. So Sally, no pressure. We're expecting you to top that today. We know you New Zealanders are competitive. We love that about you, and really looking forward to your session this morning. So once again, thank you, welcome, and over to you, Sally.
Well, where do you start? So first of all, I wish to acknowledge yourself, Ivan, Lee. It takes a lot to, and everybody in behind the scenes that has put this together. I'd like to acknowledge all of the speakers that are speaking today, and to Michael, I look forward to, thank you for your message, and I look forward to following up. I only caught the end of your presentation, so I look forward to looking at the whole presentation. Having run events all my life, I understand what it takes to get it to this point. So huge respect and acknowledgement. So you're going to have Sally Anderson on speed. I'm very conscious of the amount of time that we have. I'm wanting to impart as much value. So I'm going to be speaking quite fast to be able to impart as much value as I can. Please feel free to take as many notes as you like. So I'm a coach intuitive. I coach to cause, not symptom. So I'm interested in the Q&A at the end of anything that I raise. So I'm going to impart pretty much for the entire presentation aspects of my education, which I call co-creative leadership. Who you are in your human form is limited, who you are in your co-creative form is limitless. And I'm conscious of the amount of people out there in the world right now that are hurting, both at a personal level and a professional level. So building resilience that lasts, mastering the inner game. I felt that rather than focus on myself and my backstory and all the rest of it, I'm not focusing there tonight. I'm focusing on, but I know a lot about resilience. I'm wanting to ensure that what I impart tonight, it literally can change lives. I've coached thousands of people across all different demographics. And so I picked the best of the best for tonight, to that you could leave this presentation and apply part of what I'm advocating, whether it's personally, whether it's professionally, to be able to master that in the game that I talk about. So I'm just wanting to jump straight into the presentation and get right into it. So let's see if we can do that. Bear with me, people. So for those of you, that's my husband. And there we go.
We've got your Zoom screen at the moment, Sally, not your presentation.
Can you see can you see it now?
No, we've still got your Zoom screen for some reason. I think you've got the wrong screen shared. Maybe just stop it and restart it with the presentation.
Okay. This screen stopped. Okay, share screen. Can you see it now?
No, I think we've got your whiteboard now. Unfortunately, Not getting the right one up there.
My apologies, people.
No problem. It's the joys of technology.
Yeah.
We tested it all yesterday. We thought we had it right.
Here we go. Here we go.
There we go. Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. Okay, good. So building resilience at last, mastering the inner game. Let's get right into it. So there is a journey of a transformative nature to master oneself. So if you look at the model itself, first of all, there's change, transition, transform, transcend. So I'm wanting to walk you through basically the journey of what it is to transform to your highest level. So it's quite similar to the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell. Part of what I'm wanting to impart this evening, it's based in what I term awareness-based training. So a lot of people are highly trained. They've done the courses, they've read the books, they've done the leadership training, they've done the personal development training, but for whatever reason, they haven't experienced the level of transformation that they've wanted, nor have they known how to sustain it. So where I differentiate is that if you're going to invest money into change, let's make sure it's sustainable. So my core focus of the education that I've developed is around sustainable transformation. It's one thing to change, it's another thing to know how to sustain it. So in the context of what people are experiencing in this COVID-19 experience, leaders who were unwilling to change, evolve, or change prior to this experience, they're now being forced to. So evolving leadership consciousness, or evolving the consciousness of how we operate, it's really highlighting the fear pandemic over and above the viral pandemic that is evident on the planet. So I live in the world of uncertainty. I live in shoes that are confronting, resistant, and uncomfortable as the norm. Because if you're a change agent, you need to always be uncomfortable, always be resistant, always be confronted, because that's where the edge is. But there's the empowered aspect of confrontation, the empowered aspect of resistance, the empowered aspect of uncomfortability. So part of what I'm enjoying, believe it or not, about this current scenario that we're experiencing is all of the magic lies in uncertainty. But for leaders and for a high majority of people, uncertainty is not something that people are embracing right now. So I hope that part of the presentation tonight can give you insight into some of the things that you can do to be able to shift state, to be able to sustain state, to be able to recalibrate within and be able to deal with whatever's being thrown at you. Okay, so first of all, when people are wanting to come into the change process, most people are wanting to transition out of where they're operating. They're wanting to experience some level of transformation. I think you can go beyond that and experience some level of transcendence. So if you look at the left-hand side, on my screen it's the left, most people are living at a lower level of consciousness where it's limited. They're hanging out in their heads, disconnected, making everything mean something. They're in this default-based world. Somebody's disempowered, triggering somebody else. They're disempowered. They're living in the known world, which is limited as a human being, and they're living in these past or future-based projections. All of human suffering is a function of what we make things mean. I'll say that again. All of human suffering is a function of what we make things mean, and they live in these projections. We're either out in the past, bringing the past into our future, or we're out in the future creating a world that's not even here yet. There is only the now moment, and we're hardly ever here. This is a tried and proven model of the journey that I take people on, both at an individual level and a group level. So if somebody's wanting to change and transition from where it is that they're operating, there's only three things, and what's ever in each of the quadrants are the only things that's hindering a human being from evolving to the highest potential. In my arrogant opinion, tried and proven. So let's have a look at the first quadrant. If you are unwilling to transition, it's a function of you're not present to what it's costing you, you're unwilling to take responsibility, and you're not aware. Let's take alcoholism as an example. Most alcoholics are aware of the carnage that they're creating, but they're unwilling to take responsibility. They're disassociated from the cost, because if they were present to the cost, they'd move in a heartbeat, and then they'd obviously transition. So this phase is a learning phase. They accept that there could be a possibility of a new way, and they define who they are in that new reality to be able to transition. A high percentage of people that I coach from every demographic, a lot of them have been actively involved with either personal or professional development. They are taking action. They're applying what they know to a point. They're used to coaching and or mentoring. They're sharing who they are in the world. But 9 times out of 10, I know a lot of people who are highly trained who have not experienced the level of transformation that they've wanted, nor have they known how to sustain it. And I believe that is a function of There's a difference between wanting transformation versus being truly committed to it. And most people are unaware of this thing called the default identity. I specialize in a 7-layered approach to what I term your default blueprint. We all have an individual fingerprint. We all have a different human wiring, which I'm going to explain shortly how that's developed. So being able to understand what your individual programming is important to understand this default identity. Example, moment by moment by moment, you're either in your power or you're in your default, the disempowered state. We oscillate as human beings between the two states. Psychotherapy and counseling, they psychoanalyze the state, I disappear it, so that the new default becomes your empowered state and be able to sustain this. So I'm interested in people transforming, and I'm interested in people being able to sustain that transformation. So the third quadrant is about trusting again. Healing is not a number one strategy in boardrooms that I deal with. And there's a lot of little boys, little girls running businesses. A lot of people are disassociated and tolerating. So I wrote an article the other day about, dying to SSD, dying to serious significancy and drama. Human beings love creating their own self-made drama. This quadrant is unquantifiable. This is where one reconnects to the unknown. We were born fearless, we were born connected, and we were born intuitive. That was your birthright. And so I don't have to remind you to re-access that. More so, it is represents you to who you were. I mean, you being fearless, being intuitive, being connected, I mean, you are formidable in what it is that you can create. How many books do we need to read that say, be careful what you think, your thoughts create your reality, yet we're not responsible for where our thoughts are focused on a moment by moment basis. So to be able to reassociate, to surrender, accessing the dark night of the soul is get out of your head and get into your heart, to be able to experience the level of transcendence. I work at a high level leadership aspect. I like working with people who are across a lot of people. Obviously, when they shift by osmosis, the people shift. To then to integrate and become your vision and that oneness of being. You own who you are, part of the source, you reintegrate back into being whole and complete, and you gain this level of mastery. So on the right-hand side, I evolve people to a new level of consciousness where that realm is unlimited, where there is no meaning at a default base, connecting back in the heart space, creating power-based cultures. One of the things I do from a cultural change perspective is most organizations have a disempowered KPI culture. Why they tolerate that is beyond me. Taking them into a KPI empowered culture, creating cultures where at the executive levels they are communicating in an empowered fashion and they know how to sustain that state. Reaccessing the unknown world. Spirituality for me is about trusting the unknown as much as the known. Who would you be if you trusted the unknown world as much as the known world? It is unfathomable what it is that you could achieve. And living in the now moment. So we have a choice fundamentally to evolve to our highest potential. And what saddens me is that a lot of people have their past in their future. And I believe I've lived the life apprenticeship that I have to be able to be an inspiration to people to not put their past in their future. You're never given anything that you can't handle, regardless of what it is that you've been dealt. And your job is to find the lessons, be able to transcend that experience, to be able to then pay it forward. On the left-hand side, I call that 1 to 3 dimensional thinking, which is where people are living at that lower level of consciousness and that man-made meaning. And the world that I dance in is what I term 4th, 5th and beyond dimension, where people are living beyond their default identity and being able to, the 3 words that I use in my brand is ignite, evolve, liberate. Ignite people to get a heartbeat again. It's almost like being a co-creative defibrillator. It's kind of like, boom, are you there? What are you doing? Who are you? Legacy is the most profound conversation you can facilitate with a human being on the planet. What are you doing here? What is your DNA calling you to be in the world? There's something unique about you, and there's something that you're here to fulfill on in this lifetime. So ignite, evolve to a new level of consciousness to then be able to liberate yourself. And the more that you liberate yourself, you are an example, and then you can pay forward and liberate others. So I'm pretty much spending my entire life paying forward my own experience. Fundamentally, in the middle, we have choice. One of the most powerful distinctions on the planet. We have a choice on how I feel, choice on how we respond, choice on how we react. We have a choice. Happiness is a choice. It does not lie in some future world when circumstances shift in that place called there. This isn't it yet, there's somewhere else to get. When I get there, it's going to be better than it is now. The biggest addiction on the planet is dissatisfaction. I'll say that again. The biggest addiction on the planet is dissatisfaction. I've coached millionaires, billionaires, politicians, celebrities. They're as dysfunctional as anybody. They perceivably have everything, but they're still not satisfied. It's crazy. It's crazy. Okay, so where does it all come from? So because I specialize in the sustainable change piece, I'm interested in people understanding. If you are listening tonight and you've done a lot of training, but you're still recycling back into some old behaviors and wondering why you're not getting that breakthrough, this model will probably nail it for you. So our belief and our values are adopted in childhood. I didn't invent it. It's just part of how we human beings are wired. Both that was empowered belief and behaviors, belief and values, and it was disempowered belief and values. They then form the behaviors that we adopt. Those behaviors then form the structures that we have in our world. So a house has a foundational structure. Each human being has a foundational structure on how they dress, who they marry, where they live, which creates the culture and their worldview, which then produces the results. So most people are trying to incorporate change from the outer two layers. I'm wanting to dictate the cultural change in this organization, expecting the results to show up. I'm wanting to lose weight, and then expecting the results to show up, wondering why it's not sustainable. Any level of sustainable change, you need to go back to the original wiring. So when I do live facilitation, people often say to me, "You're trying to brainwash people." I go, "Yeah, I am," but from a positive standpoint, because you need to go back to the original wiring to be able to understand. When you can understand, you can take your power back. One of the biggest relinquishment buckets for a human being is confusion. How convenient you're confused, you don't have to take responsibility. So I just wanted to explain this with reference to the makeup of where we operate. So the number one success strategy of successful people, part of obviously what I'm wanting to impart tonight is how do you master your inner game? And from my perspective and my observation, people give this lip service. If there's one thing, if you're on this call and you suffer from being impacted by things that are happening externally, things within your relationships, things that are happening within your business, the number one thing of the things that I'm wanting to impart tonight that are going to make a difference, if you just do this one thing, from my perspective, it's boundaries first, life second, faith first, life second. You've got to put petrol in the car to go the distance to reach the destination at the speed with which you want to go. So my average morning is that I will get up, I will meditate, I will go for a 30-minute walk. Whilst I'm on that walk, I'm listening to every goal that I have in my life in the affirmative on audio. I'm listening to a motivational podcast. There's a lot happening in that 30 minutes. By the time I come back, I do one page of gratitude journal, things that I'm grateful for in my life. I'll then be on my food regime and I will have whatever food that I've prepared. And then I'll get about my day. That is mandatory. Never miss a day. Because the number one success strategy of any successful person in the world is that they have morning practices in place. It is the fuel. Try getting in your car and ain't got no petrol in it. The sad thing with this is that people intermittently do it when they've got the time, which is hardly ever. But it's the one thing that changes the monkey mind. So in the context of those, I've just shared my example. There's some examples here in this particular slide. But I heard Michael talk earlier about, life is very simplistic. We complicate the hell out of it. And it makes sense, the paddocks of cows, that analogy is that if you were to plant a small tree in a paddock of cows, it wouldn't last. But if you put a boundary around it, the tree would grow into a bloody great big tree. You could take the boundary out and everybody would live happily ever after. Boundaries are critical to being able to, obviously discipline equals freedom. The more disciplined you are, the more freedom that you have, which is a bit of an oxymoron for a lot of people. As far as recommendations tonight on what could shift your state in mastering this inner game and building resilience at last, a lot of it comes down to your morning practices. KPI empowerment tools. I've been meaning to create a phone app for this. So they talk about KPIs in corporate. Let's talk about KPIs as far as your personal well-being is concerned. This is something that I work with my clients. So weekly empowerment KPIs. Highly recommend trying it on. It's always enlightening. Rating yourself 0 to 10. on a weekly basis. So let's just run through them. And I guarantee if you did nothing after this presentation and you only did this, plus your morning practices, it would change your life, literally. And I don't say that lightly. So 0 to 10, feeling disempowered or doing confusion. So in a given week, how often do you feel disempowered? How often do you do confusion? Rate yourself 0 to 10. Languaging things as issues, problems, or challenges and reframing as projections. Every issue, problem, and challenge. So I'm a dangerous woman to talk to. Language is my vehicle. Being a coach intuitive, I listen to what's causing people when they language what's going on. Those are the symptoms. I listen to what's causing it. So pretty much everything is a projection from a disconnected state. So being able to collapse the projection and be able to find out what's happening at a causal level. A lot of people don't realize the degree to which they're disconnected and the degree to which they are hanging out in these, the perception of an issue, a problem, or a challenge. You are the solution to everything. If you trusted your intuition is your GPS. You want an answer to anything you got going on, quieten down and listen to your intuition. That is your lifeline to all the answers you will ever need. Mastering your inner critic, that voice that beats the crap out of you on a weekly basis. How often are you listening to your inner critic? To me, I'm interested in people silencing it. I'm wanting mastery of the inner critic in the schooling system. If we just did that, it would change the human psyche on the planet. Another conversation, another time. Being a 10, I train clients to be a 10. I'll go to a dairy, somebody will say to me, Sally, how are you? They'll go, my response will be absolutely amazing. And they'll go, what happened? I go, nothing happened, I just choose it. So here's the thing, 10s show up in the world, 10s get noticed, 10s attract 10 experiences. If you're hanging out at a 2, don't hold your breath waiting for things to change. You are vibration, you are resonance, you are energy. It will match what it is that you're, this isn't new, people, but for whatever reason, we as human beings do not take responsibility where we're resonating. So you may not even know what a 10 version of yourself is, but if you're able to sustain a 10 state, regardless of circumstance, your world is very, very different. Reframing language. I reframe language every moment of every day because I know that the language holds a resonance to what it is that I'm attracting. I'm one of the quickest to shift. I'm unconsciously competent to shift state. Why is that? Because I know I'm responsible for my reality. What I said before around how many books do we need to read to say, be careful what you think, your thoughts create your reality. Well, they do. But we need to, people often ask me, Sally, do you mean to say I've got to monitor every single thought I have in every single moment of the day? I go, yeah. Again, like the analogy Michael was using before about, it's a bit clunky when you get in the car and you're learning to drive, but when you get in your car, you don't need to think about it. So from that perspective, there's a huge self-interest to be able to shift state to ensure that you are in alignment. It's a bit like the movie Finding Nemo, turtles all over the place, and then they get into the slipstream. Training people, how do you get into the vortex? How do you get into flow? How do you get into the slipstream? Has a lot to do with obviously where it is that you're resonating. So training yourself to be a 10, powerful. Asking for help, allowing contribution, making requests. I've always been a vehement giver. Give. Pendulum right out. Still learning on what it is to receive. So on a daily basis and within a week, how often have you asked for help? How often have you allowed contribution? How often have you made requests of people? We have a tendency of supporting everybody else, especially if we're in a leadership role, but how often do we actually, on a daily basis, it actually trains you to actually, show to the universe that you're actually worthy of receiving. If you don't portray to the universe that you're worthy of receiving, it's a bit tricky. Regular planting seeds, talking to everyone, upselling a cup of coffee. You don't have to do it on your own. You can always have other people talking on your behalf, referring. I'm a connector. I connect people every day. For 30 years, I don't think there's a day where I haven't connected people, somebody to somebody. I just forgot that that's not a natural skill that everybody has. But again, on a weekly basis, how often have you referred somebody? The more you support somebody else, more people will support you. On a weekly basis, how often were you triggered? How often were you in a disempowered state? We're going to talk about that tonight with reference to what you can do about that and how you can shift state. Living congruent to your motivators. If you don't know what you're motivated by, it's very difficult for you to sustain your state. So you need to understand what motivates you. And how are you living congruent to that? Trusting the unknown, one's faith, whatever that is for you. Are you walking your faith 24/7 rather than just when it's convenient? Monitoring that on a weekly basis is always enlightening. Taking action versus allowing external circumstances to sway your state. Nothing externally can sway your state unless you allow it. That's always an interesting one to get your head around. Taking actions daily that make you feel confronted, resistant, and uncomfortable, knowing that this is a key access point to transformation. If you're interested in transformation, personally or professionally, it is a function of go to everything you're confronted by, resistant of, and uncomfortable with, and find your new normal. Get a sense of humor, lighten up. Yeah, that's where the magic lies. Not in the so-called comfort zone, which is so frigging uncomfortable. No drama. Who would you be if you didn't do drama in your life? Novel concept. Training people to die to drama, dying to what I term SSD, serious significance and drama, when we're the ones creating it. It's quite hilarious. Integrity, being your word. To what degree, how often have you been your word in a given week? Living one's values as a way of being. I have a huge issue with coaches in the context as they do this values process. What's the point of having values unless you walk your values? Now, here's the thing. If you've got integrity as a value, you know, you better check out what that means. That's not just when it suits. If you got integrity as a value, that's walking it 24/7. You completely reinvent yourself as a function of walking your values versus just knowing your values. Operating from a state of being versus doing. I'm all about being leadership versus doing leadership. With human beings, not human doings. I come from a staunch project management background. I don't have to-do lists. I focus on who I need to be being with what I do. I focus from a co-creative perspective. Operating in the human form's all too hard. Operating in the co-creative form, yeah, absolutely formidable. Everybody has access to that. It's on tap. It's free. You can tap in anytime you like. It's what we were born into. Applying the think, do, say, be forward the game. One of my favorite formulas. It's the mantra I live by every day. You got to know what your game is, though. So I'm very clear what my game is. So is what I'm thinking forwarding my game? If it's not, I don't think it. Is what I'm doing forwarding my game? If it's not, I don't do it. Is what I'm saying forwarding the game? If it's not, I don't say it. And in who I'm being on a day-to-day basis, is that forwarding the game? If it's not, I don't be that. Now that trains you to a very high degree of integrity. And the more that you monitor no default behavior, then you're creating a completely different reality. So my suggestion is feel free to monitor this on a weekly basis. I guarantee it will be enlightening. And then obviously shimmy the ratings up so that you actually know where to go to work on. Commitment equals results, one of my favorite formulas. So commitment equals results. Wherever the results are being produced in your life is a function of your current commitment. Now that can land like a cup of cold sick for most people, because most people think that they're committed, but the results aren't being produced. It was one of the biggest insights for me in my own journey. I love the simplicity of the formula, commitment equals results. So there's a quote called want and a quote called committed. This is also an exercise that you could do post the presentation that I believe would be quite helpful for you or people that you may know that are struggling with their current circumstances. Most people live on the quote called want, wanting the results from the quote called committed. Not possible until you get onto the quote called committed. Most people have no comprehension of what it means to be committed, because to be committed, you need to die to that old level of identity, and it's a complete death of that identity. Somebody who's overweight and somebody who's at the ideal weight, that's two completely different identities. Somebody who has struggled with money for a long period of time, somebody who has money, two very different identities. Now, if this person achieves what it is that they want in that domain and they haven't done the work on themselves, they're going to sabotage it and go back into their default identity. So that's where I'm interested in people sustaining the change and understanding what's actually going on. Listen to the language. Language will always tell you what's going on. I want to change, Sally. I want to have the relationship. I want to transform my business. I want to, I get you want it, but are you willing to be committed to it? Because that's very, very different. And that's a foreign territory for most. So if you look at this analogy, you've got a court called want and a court called committed. Everybody's like tennis court analogy. On the left-hand side, in the court called want, we hang out in our heads. We're disempowered. We're in the known realm where it's limited. We distrust. We're stuck in the how. People love being stuck in the how. Based in scarcity consciousness, disconnected, disassociated. Now on this side, there's no possibility. You're living in the old identity and you're in sabotage. Versus on the court called committed. where you're operating at a heart space, empowered in the unknown realm where the magic is, trusting the unknown again. How will always be revealed. When you move, providence moves too, in that future prosperity-based thinking, connected and associated. So I'll work a client through this model. We'll identify the unrecognizable future, be really, really clear on what it is that they want. That's the first thing you fill out. You come over to the past-based incidences. What are the 3 core things that happened in your world that stopped you from trusting the unknown? Being able to distinguish, when did you stop trusting the unknown? Because that will be part of the reason why you're not achieving what it is that you want. You actually don't trust the unknown. Identifying the top 5 things that you're tolerating. Being able to really push the bruise on what is it that you're tolerating that's not shifting and not having you have the unrecognizable future that you want, filling that out. Being able to then jump over to the pain-free, where you basically facilitate the complete opposite. So if money's an issue in the pain points, then it's financial freedom on the freedom side. It's the complete opposite. Now, at the end of that facilitative process, you ask somebody, which side would you like to operate from? And obviously everybody says the committed side. And my response will say bullshit, because if you wanted that, you would want to be there by now, which is where you bridge the gap. What are the key 5 actions that you need to take, the guaranteed 5 actions that you need to take to have that new future be a reality? Being able to facilitate that, not just, fly by night actions. What are the 5 key actions that are required to have that new identity be a reality, to die to that old identity and stop oscillating into your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s to your grave? Confrontation, resistance, uncomfortability, the true access points to unrecognizable transformation. So I'm interested in unrecognizable transformation. And there's always a smart ass in the audience. I had a few years ago, a guy say to me, Sally, if it's that unrecognizable, how do you recognize it? And I said, well, in your current reality, I'll agree with you. But see, when you die to your default level of identity, you become unrecognizable to yourself. I had a weight complaint for quite a number of years. I'm a bit of an extremist, and then I go and do body sculpting, got down to 58 kg and 8% body fat on stage. Crazy. It was a goal that I had all my life. I achieved it thinking I was going to be happier then, achieved it, and I wasn't, which is crazy. I'd done the body transformation, but hadn't done the mental transformation. So unrecognizable transformation is dying to that old level of identity and being able to experience transformation beyond your comprehension in the areas that most people, there are 4 areas that a human being wants to transform. They want to transform their financial domain. They want to transform their relationships. They're wanting to transform their weight and or well-being. And the last one is their purpose, their vocation, their calling, their legacy, their job, their vocation, kind of like dancers in that category. Those are usually the 4 areas that people are wanting to transform. Those are the 4 areas where most of human dysfunction lies, where people are finding evidence for the opposite. So I just kind of thought, if you wanted to try that on, it's always interesting. What is it that's stopping you have that future-based world be a reality for you? People are living in projections. If you put a horror movie into a DVD machine, you are expecting to see a horror movie, not a comedy or a romance movie. So you're the projector, the film is your thinking, and the screen is life and circumstance. If life and circumstances aren't occurring the way that you want, there's one place to look, and that's part of your stinking thinking, where you're hanging out. Being able to realize that your thoughts are creating your reality, and realizing the cost of not monitoring where your thoughts are focused. 9 times out of 10, most human beings on the planet, from the minute they get up in the morning to the minute they go to bed, they're either hanging out in the past or they're hanging out in the future. They're not in the now moment. And here's the thing, folks, the past is, you can't do anything about the past. If it's in your future, you're the one keep putting it there, nobody else is. And the future doesn't even exist. It only is a function of existing from your current reality, but you need to be here. So training people to be a 10, training people to understand projections and be able to no longer live in these past and future-based projections, and coming back to the now moment, which helps when you look at the 4 guiding principles to leading an empowered life. So an analogy I use, you're driving in the car, you're listening to the radio, it goes onto the static channel. You do not stay on the static channel. You quickly try and tune into the music. The sad thing is most people don't know what their music is. So there's only 4 things that disempower a human being. Again, it's my arrogant opinion. It's tried and proven. It works for me. Fear disempowers a human being. Issues, problems, challenges disempowers a human being. Inner critic, which hardly anybody talks about, disempowers a human being. And how and confusion, which is the biggest relinquishment bucket for most human beings. That is what I call it human static. So over and above living in these past and future-based projections, we are listening to the static, and we're disassociated from listening to our intuitive voice. The intuition is a muscle. The more that you trust your intuition, the more it'll kick in. So being able to teach people 4 guiding principles to leading an empowered life. How do you master fear? Fear is just a projection from a disconnected state. How do you master these issues, problems, and challenges when half the time it is a function of meaning-based projections? How do you master the inner critic? Whole another conversation again, people, but it's what I specialize in and standing for it to be in the schooling system. Can you imagine if we taught it like maths or science, a main subject in the schooling system? It would just transform the planet. You know, I can talk to a 9-year-old child, they've got a heinous inner critic. I'll talk to a 49-year-old client who's done 4 decades of self-beration. It's just crazy, but hey, let's not talk about it. Mastering of confusion. It's the last slide that I have for you this evening around the 5 relinquishment buckets that human beings tolerate, which is quite amusing considering we're the ones creating the dysfunction. So everything is a projection half the time, and we're the ones that can take responsibility for understanding where the projections are. So how do you manage that? So I have one process. It's called the RESA process. Hope I'm going okay for time here, David. It's called the RESA process. It's the only process I use with clients to take them off depression drugs in a sustainable way. In my first book, Free for Living Life Beyond the Edge, one of the chapters in my book is that I don't believe in depression. No offense to anybody. And it's not in any way, shape or form discrediting that when somebody is feeling depressed, that's not real for them. But I'm a stand for changing the face of counseling and psychotherapy. Rather than psychoanalyzing your story, I'm interested in you disappearing your story and not having your past and your future. So let's just walk this particular process through. It's very simplistic to apply, but it works. It's tried and proven. This is the one model that is used for any disempowered feeling. And this is also the model that is, process that is used for an inner critic conversation. So let's walk it through. If your inner critic is saying, who the hell do you think you are? You're in reaction. You're reacting to what that voice is saying. First phase of reaction is actually the access point to shifting it is actually acknowledging the disempowered feeling. So the thought is, who the hell do you think you are? That's the inner critic voice. In reaction is to observe it. Interesting. My inner critic just said, who the hell do I think I am? Recognition. Ask one question. What's actually really going on? Evaluation. Oh, I'm disconnected. What am I feeding? Where does that come from? Who the hell do I think I am? A bit of the past, sometimes the future as well. So in that case, it's a past and future-based projection. And I'm hanging out in child mode. Whenever you are disempowered, you're in child mode. When you are empowered, you're in adult mode. I work with a lot of CEOs and high-level executives. There's a lot of little boys, a lot of little girls out there. I can tell you that for free. So how do you collapse the projection, come back to the now? Training yourself to be in adult form all the time is part of the training, awareness-based training. Once you're aware, you can do something about it. That voice has no power unless you keep feeding it. It's like taking the electricity plug out. So identifying where the projection is, coming back to the present, shifting the sensation is realigning to what it is that you're motivated by. If you don't know what you're motivated by, then the whole thing falls apart. Now, the speed with which you shift your state to be able to shift the reaction, you got one of 2 choices. I can stay in child mode, I can stay disassociated, I can stay feeding these projections, knowing that's a choice, knowing that that's what you're doing, knowing you're the one creating the dysfunction, now that you know that, which is the power of awareness-based training, or you can choose to access the default, shift your state, which you also know is a choice, knowing that the sooner you shift your state, the sooner the circumstances are going to shift to be able to change the reaction. Let's use the same process with fear. You're feeling the experience of fear. Phase 1 reaction, you observe it. Interesting, I'm feeling fear right now. What's actually really going on? Oh, I'm disconnected. What am I feeding? Where's the fear coming from? It'll be something from the past or something in the future or both, always. What am I more committed to? Do I want to keep hanging out in child mode, feeding these projections, or do I want to come back to the present, recalibrate, reconnect to what I'm motivated by, and then be able to shift my state? The key to self-mastery is not about not getting triggered. It's the length of time you spend in the trigger, a minute, an hour, a day, a week, a month. Some people go to their graves being triggered. So I know just I'm talking very fast, but this process is so simplistic. It works because every single time you're in an inner critic conversation, every single time you're in a disempowered state, same thing comes with the human territory. You're just disassociated feeding projections, which segues nicely into the de-trigger process. People can get it intellectually, but they can't get it experientially. So I'll move them to the de-trigger process. What would it be like if you had a process where you could de-trigger within a millisecond, regardless of what's going on externally, like walking on friggin' water? Easy process. What actually happened? Factually, what did you make it mean? Man, we are meaning-based machines, and that's where all the suffering comes from. What did you make it mean about yourself? Usually comes from a process called context mastery. Another conversation, another time, but there's incidences in childhood between the ages of 3 to 5, 5 to 12, 12 to 20, 12 to 21, where you decided something and you separated. Negative incidences from childhood, proven in the teachings of ontological teachings, where you decided something, and that's running the show now. So being able to unearth for people, become aware of how that programming is impacting you now is very, very powerful. Now, if you are disempowered, you're getting something out of it. They're called ontological payoffs. Ontology, the study of what it is to be human. What are the stock standard human ontological payoffs? What do you get out of being disempowered? You get to be right, you get to make others wrong, you get to be justified about your point of view. You get to dominate, manipulate, and control. You don't have to be responsible there, and you get to be a victim, powerless to change the situation. That's what you're getting out of it. But here's the deal, you're not present to what it's costing you. Most people can rattle off the cost, but they're not present to the cost, because if they were, they'd move in a friggin' heartbeat, because the costs are too great. So then responsibility, commitment, and choice. My reframe for responsibility, you have the ability to respond differently once you're aware, through choice, to be committed to a different solution. So you can either stay in the payoffs, that's all good, milk it, give yourself half an hour, milk it, or not. But don't expect, I'm not expecting people to be happy, clappy people. I just want them to understand at every moment of every day exactly what's happening and that they are at choice. If you want your circumstances, regardless of what it is that you've been dealt, and I've been dealt a lot in my life, so I'm speaking from a hell of a lot of experience with reference to what it means to be resilient. Going back to that point about you're never given anything that you can't handle, but you also have to take responsibility for not going another week, another month, having that trajectory be other than what you want it to be. So this de-trigger process is powerful, man, with reference to being aware of what's going on, being able to shift your state. As I said, the mastery piece is the speed with which you shift. I shift so fast because I know that I'm responsible for the reality of what's occurring out there, and I'm willing to take responsibility for that. The transformational curve. So equanimity is my favorite word. It'll probably be my next tattoo. The ability to be the observer of what is, not how it could have been, should have been, wanted it to be. It is nirvana. The ability to be able to operate at a higher level of consciousness. Now that isn't meaning that you're disassociated. It's just that you've arrived at a level of consciousness where you're not impacted by external circumstance. That's the meaning of equanimity. So the transformational curve, I love it when people say, I've had a bad day, or they wake up feeling like the day's going to be bad. So low, bad, and wrong are at that lower level of consciousness in that default operating state. You're the one hanging out in your projections. You're the one creating that reality, versus operating at that higher level of consciousness, operating at a higher state of awareness in the realm of what I term equanimity. You physically cannot have a bad day if you are connected with the unknown. Not possible. And the irony is we were born connected, born fearless, born intuitive. That was our birthright. You can tap into the unknown whenever you like. Higher power, universal force, collective consciousness, God, whatever works for you. I'm unconsciously competent. 24/7, I'm in communion. To be able to facilitate what I facilitate for other people. There's no comparison to that world. It's been a long time since I've lived in the so-called known realm, because that is limited. So being able to facilitate conversations for people to experience what it's like to feel connected. I often say to CEOs, have you ever tried to vacuum when you haven't plugged it in and turned it on? It's a bit tricky. But most CEOs, they are operating in a disconnected state, and obviously that has a huge impact on, how they operate. Forgiveness, I think, in the context of resilience, in the context of being able to master one's inner game, a lot of people have a lot of areas of their life where they're unable to forgive the what happened, whether it's betrayal, whether it's some shame or some guilt. This is not unique to women and not unique to men. It's a human thing. I thought I'd mention it tonight because I think it's something that requires a hell of a lot more focus as far as people having freedom to be themselves without their past impacting their future. Resilience has a lot to do with no longer putting your past in your future. The ability to be able to champion anything that you are facing on a day-to-day basis has to do with your faith, whatever that is for you, and your ability to let go of the past and not keep putting it into your future and your thought structures. So where I delineate is the difference between experiential forgiveness versus intellectual forgiveness. And I believe this is unique of all of the research that I've done around the world in the area of forgiveness. Most people focus on the event happening or perpetrator. And then weeks can go by, months can go by, years can go by, decades can go by, and they're still impacted by their past, speaking that they've forgiven the person, event, or perpetrator, but they're still had by it because they're speaking it. And that to me is more an intellectual statement versus truly experiencing forgiveness is a function of realizing, which is switching the percentages around to experience true experiential forgiveness. The focus usually is on the event happening or perpetrator. All of the focus needs to come off that and onto yourself to forgive yourself because you've become your own worst perpetrator. So given everything that I've experienced in my own life, I became my own worst perpetrator. I was worse than the perpetrators until I learned the journey of what it is to actually forgive myself and stop focusing, because you can do nothing about the past, regardless of what it is that you've experienced. There's nothing you can do about the past, but you can do something about your future. You can do something about your present state. So at your own leisure, you can read the detail on this model, but I believe this is a game changer for people to truly experience what it's like to leave their past in the past and no longer have it impact your future. So of those of you listening tonight, if you have anything from your past that is still impacting you, the ability to be able to, who would you be if your past didn't impact you? What would you be able to create? What could you achieve? I believe upwards of 90% of people on this planet have their past in their future, and they're the ones that keep putting it there. And last but not least is the ludicrousy model. So I'll just have a bit of fun and lighten up the energy rather than the SSD, talking about default identity. But relinquishment buckets. So the 5 relinquishment buckets, I find this hilarious. So I led leadership retreats, 3-day leadership retreats for 10 months of the year for 10 years. That was one hell of a case study. And I'd facilitate in a round robin with all these CEOs. How many of you say, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough energy, I don't have enough money, I don't know how, or you're manifesting some form of illness to avoid taking responsibility for something? So they are stock standard human relinquishment buckets. We love them, absolutely love them. So I'd say to the group, write down which ones are yours. Oh, I do, I don't have enough time, and I don't have enough money, and I don't know how, and they're all talking about it. And then we do this round robin and they all relay, what their relinquishment buckets are. Why do we have a negative affirmation as human beings? Now that I'm bringing it into your awareness, you buy a car and then you see the make and model everywhere. I just challenge you in this next week, people that you love in your life or people that you work with, just notice how many of them on a day-to-day basis say, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough energy, I don't know how, I don't have enough money. We are, as human beings, unconsciously wired to verbally relay these relinquishment buckets, wondering why life's showing up. If you continue to say you don't have enough energy, guess what? If you continually say you don't have enough money, you'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yet somebody who is committed will always find the time. Somebody who's committed will always find the energy. Somebody who's committed will always find the money, the solution. Somebody who's committed will always work out the how. and somebody who's committed will look after their well-being so they don't have to manifest an illness to learn a lesson, you know. So this is, it's a ludicrousy cycle, yeah. So the operating state will always be a function of where you're relinquishing responsibility. So in the context of what I've covered off, I might just come out of this presentation just for now to, oh, we're going for time. Okay, good. It's not bad they're going there either. So in the context of some of the things that I've covered off, they're simplistic to apply. They get results. Awareness is everything, with reference to once you're aware, you can do something about it. I'm very big on people being able to get traction fast, not having to wait, because half the time they've already spent a shitload of money with other coaches and mentors and trainings and courses and all the rest of it. And if they're already highly trained, it won't take much to, you know, tweak things to be actually get things working. I've faced every adversity a human being on this planet could ever experience. So what I love about what I've developed is that people are ready, I believe, to be able to get the traction and the change that they're wanting in their lives. And it is a profound privilege to be able to facilitate that. So there you go, Ivan. It's a bit of a download. And feel free to ask me anything and let's dance.
Wow, Sally, that was a smack around the ear hole, I think, in a big way. So yeah, get out of the past, get out of the present, get back into the now, stop your nonsense, get on with life and living in a real way. So, and if any of you have got any doubts after that presentation, well, I don't know. You know, you've got to get there. You've got to just do it, as Sally says. You know, make it happen in the now. And Sally, so absolute privilege again. Really appreciate you know, your time. And yeah, folks, you may not realize it, but you just had a presentation from the future. It's 8 p.m. in New Zealand. So, you know, that is your future. Take notice of it, take cognizance of what she said. And yeah, once again, this is going to be up on the web. It's up on live, so it's worth something definitely worth reviewing and taking forward. We have a few questions, Sally, and we've got a few minutes, so we can try and just run through them very quickly. If I can go back, sure. Chat box has been busy while you've been going there, so let's get back up to the top here and say, yeah, I think first one was who, what, and how do we transform? Was that a comment from this presentation, Trevor?
No, really, it was a correction of a statement that I had made from spelling. But you know what? I'm just entranced. I see Michael Jackson. I see Sally Anderson, and between the two of them, I'm wanting to throw them into our political masters and just have them spend a day or two with these individuals. And then the question is, what does it take to transform? Is it them or is it us? How do we change what's happening in our economy at the moment? Are we misreading this thing? Or is it people like this that have to help our leaders actually find that they are responsible for representing us, but we are responsible for voting them in? What's the simple solution? So Sally, I'm going to just throw that to you, bringing back everything that you're about in rebuilding our shattered economy. What's a 1, 2, 3 word solution to what we can do from tomorrow as a country? There's a challenge.
I wouldn't say it's a challenge. I mean, I'm not into conspiracy theories or one to get into political conversations personally, but I'll give you my opinion. So it's a bit like the weight loss industry. It's $1 trillion industry, not interested in sustainable solutions. I'm a threat to the pharmaceutical industry because I've created a non-drug related solution. Money is what makes the wars, you know, in perpetuity, you know, keep on occurring. The establishment or the system, money is the main thing that keeps, you know, the political realm. You know, it's about money. So in the context, you know, what's the 1, 2, 3 simple solution? I think each individual person, which is what I love about the pandemic, and I'm not in any way, shape or form discrediting the impact the pandemic has had on people, but it's been a mass awakening. I mentioned it in my last presentation that the only way that human beings evolve is through adversity. And usually, whether it's a tornado, a flood, a earthquake, these acts of God are usually what awakens people. When you've been stripped of everything, you kind of like learn a few things. And there's been a mass awakening from a global perspective, not just, you know, particular countries. So I believe the resonance, the vibrational resonance of where each individual person operates, which is why I'm wanting my education. I lived the life that I have and I survived it and I'm here and created what I have. If it was in the schooling system, just something as simplistic as that, it would change the human psyche as we know it. We are still teaching the same thing in the schooling system. So and the system wants to keep it that way, to keep the evolution of the human psyche at a certain state so that it doesn't evolve beyond what it currently is. It's the same thing at the leadership level. Traditional leadership is dead. The linear, hard skill training of leadership is dead because it's not evolving the consciousness of those who lead, which is where I come in, which is where I'm a threat, because I'm a threat to the status quo. So I believe, as far as answering to your question without segueing off, is that the individual resonance of where each individual is operating has a critical impact on the whole, which is why we need to evolve what's being taught to people to be able to raise their consciousness, to be able to impact the system that is denying humanity what it needs. And from my perspective, it's about the consciousness of the human psyche. We are not investing into changing that, and it's impacting future generations that aren't even born yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. We've got to actually make those changes, and now's the time, without a shadow of a doubt. And I think the situation that has been created in the world right now actually enables those kinds of changes. And I think it's up to us as individuals. So, you know, Trevor asked the question, who do we transform? Well, there's only one person you can really at the end of the day, and that's you. Got to start with yourself and take it out from there. And so again, Sally, what a privilege. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, the clock is ticking. As much as we'd love it to stand still in the now, we have to move on. So I'm going to again just really, from all of us, real privilege. I know we could carry on for hours chatting to you, but thank you so much.
Well, I hope you found value, and it's been an absolute privilege, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Love you guys.